What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I'm going to share with you 8 mistakes you must avoid when transplanting into your garden. Let's go! I figured the best way for me to showcase the mistakes that you must avoid when transplanting is to just go out there and actually transplant, and then I'll highlight some of those mistakes as we're going through it. And when it comes to transplanting, the ultimate goal essentially is to take the plants from one location to move them to their new and final location with the least amount of stress and without impeding the growth. Before we even begin the act of transplanting, often there's a number of mistakes that are already made. And we'll learn as time goes on that transplanting is often more about good planning as opposed to any good technique or trick. So the first mistake that people often make when transplanting is that they put their plants out way too early, especially when it comes to your summer veggies like cucumbers and tomatoes. So I know you've probably done it. I've done it in the past where you've started this stuff and then, the first nice day comes and you're so excited you want to get out there and put everything into the ground. But I want to urge you to exercise some patience because this can put you back a lot. When it comes to growing things like cucumbers and tomatoes and stuff, you don't want to get them out too early because that can really cause some transplant shock, especially cucumbers. They really hate having cold feet. So when it comes to planting out your cucumbers, I advise that you wait about 3 to 4 weeks after your last expected frost date in order to get your cucumbers in. So for example, my last expected frost date is April 19th. Today it's about the 20-something of May, so we're about 4 or 5 weeks after our last expected frost date, and I just started putting all my cucumbers and stuff in. So when it comes down to it, you're better off being a little late when you put your stuff in as opposed to early, because what you don't want to do is, believe me, I've done it in the past. You get your tomatoes out early, you check the weather and it looks nice for a couple days, and then all of a sudden, about a week later, you see that there's a day where it's gonna get down to 30 degrees at night or 32, and you're freaking out. You're going crazy trying to cover all your plants, make sure you don't lose anything, and if it does get cold and kill your plants, you've wasted all that time just because you try to get stuff in a little earlier. So I suggest, please, back your transplanting up just about a week or so, and it'll make all the difference, and it'll just make all the time that you invested actually worth it when you put it in. So we'll start getting this thing into the ground, but before I even do, there's another mistake we often make before we get stuff planted. The second mistake that gardeners often make when transplanting is that they don't harden their plants off. So hardening your plants off essentially just means that you're getting your plants acclimated slowly to the environment that they're going to be going into or being transplanted into. So for instance, say you start some tomato plants inside and you want to plant them out. What you don't want to do is just take those tomato plants from outside, bring them outside and plant them right into the ground. That's going to stress your plants out so much. Instead, you want to slowly acclimate those plants to the environment they're going to go into. So if it's tomatoes and you want to plant them a week from today, you want to go outside, put your tomatoes in a shady spot for about an hour and then bring them in. The next day, put them out in a shady spot with a little wind for 2 hours and then bring them in. And just slowly allow them to get used to the temperatures. And by the end of the week, leave them outside overnight so they're used to the temperature and they're used to that outside environment, which is going to be a lot different than the inside stuff. If you do that and they're adjusted, then you transplant them, that'll prevent a lot of shock, which will make a huge difference and get your things growing consistently and quickly. Before I even get this in, I want to talk about the third mistake that gardeners often make. And this has to do with before we even put it in too. And it has to do with planting at the wrong time of day. You'll notice right now, it is one of the hottest parts of the day. We're talking midday and it's about 80-something degrees. The plants are starting to wilt with all the heat. Even though, look at all those radishes in there, look beautiful. But this is midday, so we do not want to transplant into the garden at midday. That's going to be a lot of stress for the plants. Because if the sun's just beating and scorching down, they're going to have to adjust to the new home. That's not what we want. Instead, we want to plant either in the early morning or later in the evening. But if you do have to plant at midday like I'm planting right now, there are a few things you can do. So you can plant this right now at midday. And then what I like to do is just take a shade covering and cover your garden with the shade covering. That'll reduce the amount of direct sunlight and allow it to adjust a little easier. So after I get this into the ground, we'll put some shade cover over the top, and that'll allow us to kind of plant at the time of the day when you really shouldn't. One thing you'll notice is this cucumber plant, it's just getting its first true leaves. Timing is very important of the age of the plant. We don't want this to be root bound, and that's our fourth mistake that gardeners often make. They plant out root bound plants. So you'll notice right here, these borage, they've been in here a little too long, so they're starting to get root bound. They're losing some health. And this won't be a huge deal because they're root bound to put into the ground, but some plants you really do not want to put in root bound. For example, peppers or tomatoes. If you go to the store or something and you see some peppers and they look, you know, pretty healthy and big, but if they have flowers on them or they are starting to flower, you don't want those plants. Same thing with tomatoes too. Those plants are so stressed out that they're flowering at that young age, and that'll impede their production throughout their whole life. So that's not what we want. Peppers really shouldn't start flowering until about 2 months after you put them into the ground. So if they're flowering before you put them in, that's not a good sign. Let's flip this over and just see. See, it's getting a little root bound. See how all the roots are going in circles, getting tied up. If we were to plant this, which I'm not gonna right here, we would wanna, you know, break the roots up a little bit so they're not all just twisting in with one another. But we're not gonna plant that right here. So that's that fourth mistake. Don't plant root bound plants. You know, it might be deceiving looking at the pepper thinking that's already flowering. If I put that in, I'll get fruit early. Don't let that trick you. Don't fall for that. Make sure you put in good plants that are young and still in the growth stage. The fifth mistake that I see gardeners making a lot is that when they want to transplant something into the ground, the day before they're not going out and watering this plant. So the reason this is important is when we want to transplant into the ground, when we flip this over, we want to make sure it's just not breaking apart. So if we don't water something and the plant is really dry, if the soil is really dry, when we flip this over, you know, there's likelihood that it's just going to break up like this because it's too dry. So we don't want that to happen. To avoid that, what we do is water the night before, and then the soil will be nice and wet and moist, and we flip it over, it won't just fall apart. So let's get this in. And that leads me to my sixth mistake that people often make. And the sixth mistake they make is that they don't space things correctly. So to avoid that issue of not having correct spacing, what I like to do is go with the square foot gardening method. It makes it very simple, very easy to do, very straightforward. And then I just follow the guidelines where it says, you know, 4 lettuces per square foot, like we have right here, 1 tomato per square foot. And we just let that guide us and move us along. So let's actually get this Socrates cucumber in. So we're gonna put this on the outside here, and what I'm going to do is just let this grow out of the bed and just trellis along the ground. So as we flip this over, you'll see how it holds its shape there because we watered it the day before. See how the roots are not root bound at all? That's exactly what we want, and it has those first true leaves on it. Next, we're just going to put on some mycose. You don't have to put this on, but this does help with the transplant shock also. It's like a little bonus thing to add. Next, we're going to tuck this in, and this is a vine, so we can bury the stem a little bit. Certain plants you can bury the stems, some plants you shouldn't. So vining things like tomatoes and cucumbers you can bury a little bit, but you don't want to bury the stems too deep up something like your peppers. The next mistake I see gardeners making all the time is that they don't label their plants. And when they do label them, I've made this mistake many times, and it's one I had to learn for myself. I didn't label them with a marker that was UV resistant. So in the past, I've labeled my plants, and then, you know, after a couple weeks or something, the sun would eat away at the marker, and then you come out here weeks later and there'd be no mark on anymore, and you wouldn't have a clue what kind of variety it is. So make sure you use a UV resistant marker. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can get this one if you want. It seems to work pretty well for me. There we go, the cucumber is all tucked in. We just push down lightly to make sure there's no airspace. And the 8th mistake I see people making is after they planted, they don't water sometimes. You always want to make sure you're watering your plants in. What this is going to do is give your plants some moisture, which they definitely need, and it's also going to fill up a lot of that airspace. We know that roots need air to breathe and to grow, but we don't want big gaps of airspace. So this will kind of settle the soil and everything, and then we'll pop that in and it's ready to go. Except it is midday, like I said. So this isn't the best time to do it. So what I'm gonna do is grab my shade cloth, throw it over the top, and just give you guys a little picture or an idea of what you can do if you wanna or have to plant midday like I did. There we go, we have the cucumber all planted. Now I'm gonna get this hinged hoop house down. And the reason I'm gonna do this is so I can get my shade covering on here. I've got a 40% shade cloth, and you'll notice, like I mentioned, a lot of the stuff in here is wilting. So it'll be good to cover the lettuce and things like that. I did just water this in the morning, but it's a hot day for what time of year it is. It's usually in the 70s. Today it's like 85 or something. So all we're gonna do is just cover this up with a shade cloth and then come inside and take a peek. And look, we've got that nice shade in there for the cucumber, so it can adjust a lot better. This reminds me of an old story Bill Mollison has talked about before. And he said that, I think it was Africa or somewhere that he went, and he was teaching permaculture gardening and teaching all these people to garden who have never gardened before. So he told this group of African women that they should, you know, transplant their stuff into the garden, but he didn't give them a lot of instruction. He forgot to tell them that, like, not to put them out in the scorching sun. So Bill said he went back like the next day. I think he was kind of worried that a lot of the plants were going to be dead, just being cooked in the sun. And when he went there, he noticed that they had their seedlings and they had built out of like sticks and stuff, their own mini version of like a shade cloth with all sticks and stuff going through it to kind of, you know, keep it safe as it was young. And he was intrigued by this, and he was asked kind of like, why did you do that? Why did you cover the plants in the sun? Like why did you cover them and not just let them cook? And their basic answer was, you wouldn't leave a baby out in the sun. So I think that's a really cool way to look at it. It's like you're taking care of these plants. They're living things. So try to allow them to adjust and try to give them the easiest life, and they'll produce a lot more food for you. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you pick up some of these ideas and some of these mistakes that I share with you about transplanting, and you learn from them, and you don't make some of these mistakes, which allows you to get earlier harvests, better harvests, and just makes gardening overall a lot more fun. I just checked the temperature. It's actually in like the mid to high 90s here today. So it's hot for a spring day. Some of my lettuces are really starting to wilt and stuff. So I'm gonna get a shade covering over in this section too. I think it'll be a big help. But I wanted to thank Wingard MT for your new channel membership. Me and Tuck appreciate you being part of Team Grow, and we just wanted to thank you. And if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. Don't forget to check out the merch down low. And remember, whenever you're on Amazon, start your shopping with our Amazon affiliate link. Tuck and James will be back at you again real soon. We